You won't believe what just came out after Malcolm-Jamal Warner's sudden death. Everything seemed calm, everything seemed fine, until Raven-Symoné, his former co-star, broke her silence. And when she did, it wasn't just a few words. It was a raw, emotional voice memo that left fans shaken. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Her tribute wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't for the cameras. It came straight from a place of pain. She talked about his daughter. She talked about his wife. And she talked about the quiet sadness Malcolm had been carrying for years. What makes this story different? It's not just about the death of a famous actor. It's about a secret grief, a broken bond, and the silence between two people who once saw each other as family. Raven remembered how their bond began. When she joined The Cosby Show, she was only a child, full of life, energy, and nerves. But Malcolm, older and already loved by fans as Theo Huxtable, took her under his wing. Behind the scenes, he was like a big brother, not loud, not flashy, but always there. She once said he was the kind of person who didn't need to say much to be understood. He gave advice without judging. He listened without interrupting. And for Raven, that quiet strength meant everything. The cast was a second family, but Malcolm made her feel safe in a world that could be harsh, even for a child star. Years passed. The Cosby Show ended. Their lives moved on. Raven grew up and built her own career, acting, singing, and later becoming a talk show host and LGBTQ+ advocate. Malcolm took a different road. He stayed out of the spotlight most of the time. He focused on his music, poetry, and directing. He worked quietly, far away from gossip and drama. But this is where it gets interesting. Behind that peaceful image, Malcolm had a side that very few people ever saw, a side that carried emotional pain, a side that never truly healed from the struggles of growing up in front of millions. You see, Malcolm wasn't the kind of man to show his pain. He smiled in interviews, he posted positive things on social media, he looked strong. But according to those who really knew him, that smile often hid a tired heart. His early fame came with pressure. Being Theo Huxtable meant being perfect all the time. Fans expected him to stay the same boy they grew up watching. But life isn't a TV show, and Malcolm had to deal with real problems, real emotions, and real disappointments. One of those was the downfall of The Cosby Show after Bill Cosby's controversies. Malcolm never said anything negative in public, but behind closed doors, he was deeply hurt. The show had given him a name, a purpose, a platform, and now it was stained forever. Raven hinted at this pain in her message. Her words didn't just show sadness, they showed regret. She said she was surprised by his death, that she didn't see it coming, that there were no signs. But then she said something else, something that stopped people in their tracks. She said, he was gentle, and sometimes that gentleness made you forget that he needed care too. That sentence said more than anything else. It was clear she wasn't just mourning him. She was blaming herself. Maybe she hadn't checked in enough. Maybe she thought he was doing better than he really was. Maybe she missed the signs too. But here's the shocking part. No one around him seemed to notice anything either. There were no headlines about health problems, no rumors about personal troubles. Just days before his death, he was spending time with his daughter. He was working on new projects. He was even in talks to return to TV in a new role. Everything looked fine on the outside. But behind the curtain, something had changed, something had cracked, and no one knew until it was too late. Raven's tribute was quiet, but the silence in her voice said everything. But this is where the story took an even more heartbreaking turn. As fans continued mourning the sudden loss of Malcolm-Jamal Warner, questions began rising like never before. People weren't just sad, they were confused. How could someone who seemed so stable, so at peace, just disappear without warning? His death wasn't just sudden, it was silent. And that silence is what made it terrifying. It left people wondering what had really been going on in his life. Was he silently battling something? Had he been trying to protect his loved ones from worry? Or was he simply too tired to carry the weight anymore? Let me tell you, the deeper you go, the more it starts to feel like something was being hidden. Not out of shame, but out of habit. Malcolm was known to be extremely private. He kept his inner circle small. He barely gave interviews. He rarely posted online. Even those who worked closely with him admitted that he was hard to read. One crew member said you could be with Malcolm all day and still not really know how he was feeling. He had a way of showing you just what he wanted to show and nothing more. That's the craziest part. His smile, his calm, his peace. It was real, but it may have also been a shield. And now that shield was gone, and people were left trying to piece together a puzzle that had never been on the table. Raven's message continued to haunt the internet, not because she cried, but because she didn't say much. Her tone said more than her words. It was heavy, regretful, almost like she was trying to make peace with something she hadn't made peace with in life. She mentioned his daughter again, his wife, his mother. She said she was sending them love. But if you listened closely, you could hear something else, like she was also talking to herself, as if she was trying to say sorry. Sorry for the time lost. Sorry for not saying the right things. Sorry for drifting apart. You won't believe how many fans picked up on this right away. The comments were filled with messages like, she's blaming herself, and you can hear the guilt in her voice. And yet, no one was blaming her. That's what made it more tragic. Everyone understood. Life moves fast. Fame takes over. People lose touch, not because they want to, but because time slips by. But destiny took an unexpected turn, and Raven didn't get a chance to say goodbye. That truth alone made the tribute 10 times more powerful. It wasn't just a celebrity remembering another celebrity. It was a sister in pain, trying to say the words she never got to say when it mattered most. Meanwhile, more people from Malcolm's past began to speak up. Tempest Bledsoe, who played Vanessa, said, "We were siblings in every sense. I'm still in shock. There's so much I wish I said." Keshia Knight Pulliam, who played Rudy, simply wrote, "Rest in peace, brother. I'll forever cherish our memories." These weren't planned PR messages. They were real, raw, and full of the same emotions Raven had shown. They had all grown up together, and now one of their own was gone. Not just gone, but gone without answers. Fans around the country began organizing vigils. In Brooklyn, in Harlem, in Los Angeles, people lit candles, held signs, and played his spoken word poetry out loud in the streets. Murals of Malcolm began appearing with words like "Forever Theo, Forever Loved" painted across brick walls. The mourning wasn't just for the man. They were mourning the years they had shared watching him. He wasn't just a TV character. He was a piece of their childhood, a symbol of calm, cool strength in a world full of noise. And now he was gone, quietly, unexpectedly. But here's what makes it even more mysterious. Despite all this grief, no official cause of death had been released. His family chose to remain silent. No public statements, no funeral footage, no last words. And while fans tried to respect that privacy, they couldn't help but wonder, was there something more to the story? One anonymous former crew member hinted, "Fame takes a toll, especially when you grow up under it." That line stayed with people. It raised more questions than it answered. But this is where it gets even more emotional, because the more people remembered Malcolm, the more they started to realize just how much he had been hiding behind that calm face. He wasn't just a talented actor. He was a man who had spent most of his life carrying quiet burdens. And those burdens, though invisible, were heavy. Raven's message hinted at it, but others began echoing the same thing. That Malcolm had always been the one who looked strong for everyone else. He was the one you leaned on, the one you called when you needed peace. But what happens when the person who holds everyone up has no one holding them? People close to Malcolm started coming forward, without revealing too much, but just enough to make the world pause. One friend said he had moments where he felt like no one truly understood him. He was known for being Theo, but that wasn't who he was anymore. He had outgrown that role, but the world never let him move past it. That constant pressure to live up to an image, it slowly wore him down. He wasn't chasing fame anymore. He had already lived it. He wanted peace, truth, and something more meaningful. But fame has a way of following you, even when you run from it. Raven's words started to sound even more painful in this light. When she said, he was gentle, and sometimes that gentleness made you forget that he needed care too. It was like she was finally seeing something she had missed for years. The kind of pain that hides in plain sight. She mentioned how deeply rooted he was in family life. His daughter, his wife, his mother, they were his entire world. He kept them away from the spotlight for a reason. He didn't want them to go through what he did. But in protecting them, he also isolated himself. And that quiet isolation may have come at a cost. Fans began to look back at Malcolm's interviews, what little he had given over the past few years. And in some of them, if you really listened, you could hear a slight sadness under his words. He would smile when talking about The Cosby Show, but he would also pause, reflect, and sometimes lower his voice. He once said, it's hard to explain what it's like to be remembered for a version of yourself that no longer exists. That one sentence opened people's eyes. He had been trying to grow, to change, to heal, but the world only saw Theo. The craziest part is that even with all this inner conflict, Malcolm never showed bitterness. He never lashed out. He kept writing poetry, kept creating music, kept focusing on art that meant something. He even won a Grammy for his work, but he didn't use it to boost his fame. He used it to express himself, to say the things he never could in interviews. His poetry wasn't just creative, it was personal. It was filled with lines about pain, healing, race, identity, and love. And now, those poems felt like confessions. Messages he left behind, hoping someone would hear them one day. Raven wasn't the only one feeling regret. So many people started to say the same thing, like, I wish I had reached out. I thought he was okay. He always looked fine. That's what made this tragedy feel so deep. Malcolm had done everything right. He stayed out of drama. He stayed close to his family. He focused on meaningful work. But he still slipped away quietly. And it reminded people everywhere that sometimes even the strongest souls need someone to ask, are you really okay? Social media was filled with tribute posts, old clips, and throwback moments from The Cosby Show, but alongside that nostalgia was a wave of guilt. People felt like they had celebrated the character but forgotten the man. And Raven's message had become a symbol of that realization. Her tears, her silence, her pain, it all came from a place of knowing that something had been missed, something important, and now it was too late to fix it. But even as the days passed and tributes continued pouring in, the sadness surrounding Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death didn't fade. It only deepened. Because now the world wasn't just mourning a talented actor, they were mourning what felt like a missed opportunity, a missed conversation, a missed warning sign. And for Raven-Symoné, that pain seemed even more personal. Her tribute wasn't long, it wasn't filled with stories or behind-the-scenes memories. It was quiet, heavy, and filled with words left unsaid. That's what made it hit so hard. She didn't just lose a former co-star. She lost a part of her past, a connection that had slowly faded, even though the love remained. The more people reflected on her message, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about grief, this was about regret, about the silence between them that time had built, about wanting just one more moment to say, I miss you, I still care, you mattered to me. She didn't say those words out loud, but you could feel them in every pause, every shaky breath. It wasn't just a farewell, it was an apology to him, to herself, and to all the time that had passed between them. But here's the part that truly left everyone heartbroken. Raven had actually tried to reach out. Sources close to her revealed that a few years ago, she had made an effort to reconnect with Malcolm. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet message, a check-in. But life happened, they both got busy. And that conversation never really happened. That distance remained, and now, with him gone, that space between them felt permanent. That's what made this loss so painful. It wasn't just about losing someone, it was about losing the chance to say what mattered most before it was too late. And fans felt that too, because so many of them grew up watching Malcolm on The Cosby Show. He wasn't just another actor. He was the calm, cool brother they all looked up to, the one who always had it together. And now, realizing he might have been struggling in silence, it made people think about their own lives, their own friends, their own quiet loved ones who always seem okay on the outside. Malcolm's legacy wasn't just in his roles or awards, it was in how he lived, with dignity, with heart, and with a deep commitment to the people he loved. He didn't chase headlines, he didn't start scandals. He stayed grounded in a world that often pulls people away from who they really are. That's what made him rare, and that's why his loss feels so big. In the end, Raven's tribute wasn't about the show they were once on. It wasn't even about the fame they shared. It was about the bond between two souls who had once been like family, and how time and silence can stretch even the strongest connection. It was about grief, yes, but it was also about the deep, painful realization that sometimes love isn't enough if it's never spoken. And maybe that's what this story leaves behind. A reminder to reach out, to speak up, to check on the strong ones, to say the things we keep putting off. Because life doesn't always give second chances, and sometimes the most heartbreaking part of goodbye is never getting the chance to say it out loud.